All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric, from a men's point of view, and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium: grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium: arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace, women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendis est. The Woke Plague, How Cultural Marxism Hijacked Society and How to Reclaim Your Mind, written by Conrad Riker. Available now, links in description. Buy on Amazon or Google or Spotify Amazon link, https://www.amazon.com/nashi Conrad Riker ebook DPB0DF6KGR1S Google link, https://play mo google.com store audiobooks details ID AQAAEI5W2NLM Spotify link, https://openspadehe.com show 2WCXCQZKJBL1BM and FOKCLB0 The Woke Plague, the hidden logic behind the public ritual. You've heard the speech. Every man has. She sits across from you, arms folded, jaw set, monologue loaded, and announces that she has forgiven you, but not really, not yet. First you must understand. First you must acknowledge. First you must sit in the chair she has designated, wear the expression she has scripted, and speak the words she has pre-approved. She calls it closure, she calls it healing, she calls it doing the work. And when you finally ask, tired, cornered, half-gelded by the ritual, if she has actually forgiven you or is simply enjoying the performance of her own magnanimity, she fires back the therapy industry missile. Forgiveness is a gift I give myself. Fine, beautiful. Then here is the irrefutable question, delivered clean and surgical, the one sentence that collapses the entire theater. If forgiveness is a gift you give, why do you need my permission to keep it? Watch what happens to her face, that microsecond of glitch, because the question is a blade that finds the seam in the ideology and twists. The entire gynocentric control apparatus, therapy culture, HR reconciliation sessions, the girlfriend who is never wrong but always wounded, the ex-wife who forgives you on the condition you keep paying, depends on a single hidden premise, that forgiveness is not a gift but a leash. She claims unilateral authority, I forgive for me, but demands bilateral compliance, but you must perform. The contradiction is not accidental, it is architectural. It is how the machine runs. Dr.
Winona, the composite goddess of every pop psychology podcast, every couples counseling manual, every self-help book that treats male existence as an apology waiting to be issued, will attempt a defense.
She will say sincerity requires participation. She will say forgiveness without accountability is hollow. She will say you are minimizing. She will say you are deflecting. She will say this is exactly the kind of behavior she is talking about. Every dodge, every pivot, every thought-terminating cliche will be deployed, because the question cannot be answered without admitting the grift. What follows is the audit definitions, logic evidence, the same standard applied to both parties without exception or apology. By the end, you will see the mechanism nakedly, as naked as the emperor in the old story, strutting through town, while the courtiers fawn over garments that do not exist. Except in this version of the story, the courtiers have master's degrees in clinical social work, and they are billing you $200 an hour to admire the fabric. The question: if forgiveness is a gift you give, Why do you need my permission to keep it? Why it pops the ideology? If forgiveness is a moral virtue requiring internal reconciliation, the forgiver cannot be forced to be done by an external decree. If it is a transactional reset, the right to declare it done must be reciprocal. Not gendered, the child version. If I give you a present, can you take it back just because you changed your mind? Follow-up questions. Does done mean the issue is resolved or that you are no longer angry? If I forgive you, do I still owe you an apology for being forgiven? Who is the judge of whether the apology was sufficient? Is your feeling more real than my action? Why does the laborer not get to set the terms of the settlement? Axis Question Bank. The asymmetry of emotional labor. Best question. If men are responsible for the emotional climate, why are they not responsible for the emotional verdict? Why must the laborer, man, manage the mood, but the observer, woman, hold the gavel? Grammar, lexical basis, role, asymmetry, and agency distribution. Why it lands highlights the unfair distribution of power and responsibility. If emotional labor is work, why is the woman's right to be done unpaid and unconditional? Grammar, logical basis, economic analogy and definition of labor, why it lands, reframes emotional dynamics as a labor dispute. The definition of done. Best question. Does done mean the issue is resolved or that the woman is no longer angry? If done means resolution, why does it often require more apologies after the fact? Grammar, logical basis, causality and temporal logic, why it lands, exposes the moving goalpost of resolution. Is done a state of mind or a state of record, and who keeps the record? Grammar, logical basis, epistemology and narrative authority, why it lands, challenges the source of truth in the relationship. The burden of proof in conflict resolution. Best question, why does the man bear the burden of proving he has forgiven, while the woman bears none to prove she has been forgiven? If forgiveness is mutual, why is the proof unilateral? Grammar, logical basis, burden of proof and evidentiary asymmetry, why it lands, points out the logical inconsistency in mutual claims. Who is the judge, jury, and executioner of the apology? Grammar, logical basis, authority and power dynamics, why it lands, simplifies the power structure to its core. The reciprocity of forgiven debt. Best question. If a debt is forgiven, does the creditor lose the right to collect? Or does the debtor lose the right to complain? Why does the woman retain the right to collect emotional interest on a forgiven debt? Grammar, logical basis, contract law analogy and temporal persistence. Why it lands uses legal logic to expose emotional illogic. Is forgiveness a cancellation of debt or a restructuring of terms? Grammar, logical basis, definition and semantic precision. Why it lands forces a clear definition of the act. The authority of the victim's narrative. Best question. If the victim's feeling is the ultimate truth, how can the victim be wrong about being done? Why is the woman's internal state more real than the man's external actions? Grammar, logical basis, epistemic priority and subjectivity. Why it lands challenges the primacy of emotion over action. If narrative is truth, who edits the script? Grammar, logical basis, narrative construction and power. Why it lands highlights the control over the narrative, the temporal sovereignty of resentment. Best question, why does the woman hold the temporal key to the relationship status, while the man holds the labor key? If time heals all wounds, why does the woman control the clock? Grammar, logical basis, temporal logic and agency. Why it lands points out the control over the timeline of resolution. Is resentment a debt that expires or a debt that compounds?
Grammar, logical basis, economic analogy and temporal decay. Why it lands frames resentment as a financial instrument. Dr. Winona attempts the defense, when being done is done, toward an ethics of relational closure. By Dr. Winona, feminist Marxist, PhD, Professor of Gender Studies, High Coven member. Forgiveness is, as we teach in our seminar on restorative relational ethics, the highest gift one human being can offer another.
It is a sovereign act of grace, and like all acts of grace, it belongs entirely to the giver. This should be uncontroversial, and yet, I notice semester after semester a peculiar resistance from certain students. Let us say, the ones who arrive already convinced they have earned what was never theirs to claim to a rather simple proposition. The right to be done. Forgiveness is the internal labor of releasing resentment. It is a gift the wounded party gives to herself first, then conditionally to the one who harmed her. Being done is the relational boundary that says, I have processed this. I have located my truth, and I no longer owe you access to my emotional landscape, to my counter-narrative, to my revision of what happened. Note the asymmetry my critics are so eager to deny. The person harmed does the forgiving. The person forgiven receives. These are not equivalent roles. To demand symmetry here is to demand that the thief and the homeowner meet at the exact same place in the doorway. The homeowner lives there. The thief chose to enter. And yet, I am told repeatedly, usually by men who have read precisely one article about emotional reciprocity, that this is unfair. That if forgiveness is a gift, the giver should not need the recipient's permission to keep it, as though the gift were a physical object that passes cleanly from hand to hand, rather than an ongoing emotional, psychic, and political negotiation between unequally positioned subjects. The argument, stripped to its syllogism, runs: Premise 1, forgiveness is an internal sovereign act. Premise 2, sovereign acts require no external permission. Conclusion: therefore, the forgiver cannot be obligated to negotiate the terms of being done. This is elegant. It is also a category error disguised as a syllogism, because forgiveness as internal act and forgiveness as relational status are not the same object. I can forgive you privately, release my anger, wish you well, feel the weight lift, and still be entitled to say, we are done. I do not want to revisit this. I do not want to perform the emotional theater of reconciliation for your comfort. I do not want to prove to you that I have forgiven you, because the proof you demand is itself a new demand, a new extraction, a new door you believe you have the right to knock on. The right to be done is not the opposite of forgiveness. It is forgiveness's final form. Here is what my interlocutors cannot seem to hold in their minds simultaneously. I can be done and I can have forgiven you. These are not intention. What is intention is your desire to be reassured that you have been forgiven, to receive evidence, ongoing confirmation, a certificate of absolution, and my right to decline to provide that reassurance indefinitely. The forgiver controls the gift, but the forgiver also controls the exit. That is what makes it a gift rather than a transaction. Now, I anticipate the objection, but if you control both the forgiveness and the exit, you control the entire emotional economy of the relationship. You are judge and jury. Yes? And? This is where we must speak honestly about power, which is to say, about history, the demand for reciprocal emotional jurisdiction. I get to declare when it's resolved too. Presumes a level playing field that has never existed between men and women, in relationships, in workplaces, in the discourse itself. The woman who says, I'm done, is exercising a power that has been systematically denied to her, the power to define the terms of her own emotional closure, rather than having those terms defined for her by the person who caused the harm in the first place. To call this authoritarian is to mistake self-protection for domination. It is to say, because I cannot control when you stop being angry, you are controlling me, but anger and its cessation is not control. It is information, it is lived experience. And lived experience, as any serious scholar of epistemology will tell you, is a valid and indeed necessary source of knowledge, particularly for those whose knowledge has been historically dismissed as irrational, hysterical, or, yes, I will use the word emotional. The accusation of emotionalism is itself an emotionalism. A man who says you're being emotional is having an emotion about my emotion and calling it reason. This is not logic. This is a power move with a thesis statement. So when I say the harmed party has the right to declare done, I am not prescribing chaos. I am prescribing honesty. The honesty that says resolution is not always mutual. Sometimes it is unilateral. Sometimes the person who was hurt gets to decide the shape of the ending because she is the one who had to survive the middle. And if that feels unfair to you, if you feel you deserve a hearing, a process, an appeal, I invite you to sit with that feeling, examine it. Ask yourself where else in your life you have been promised that your feelings about your own actions would determine the consequences of those actions. The answer is nowhere. Not in law, not in history. Not in any institution men built. You built a world where the harmed party petitions the powerful for redress. Welcome to your own architecture, only this time you are the one knocking on the door. And we are done answering it. Dr. Feminist Marxist's forthcoming book, The Grace of the Exit, Toward a Feminist Phenomenology of Relational Closure, will be published by Oxford University Press in spring 2026. Theory Critique, the gift that keeps on taking, a philosophical autopsy of the right to be done. 1. The question. Here is a question that the architects of modern relational ideology cannot answer without collapsing their own framework. If forgiveness is a gift you give, why do you need my permission to keep it? Read it again. Sit with it. The question is short, plain, and devastating. The way a child's question can level an empire of pretense. It does not shout, it does not accuse. It simply identifies a contradiction in the dominant ideology of emotional governance, then waits for an answer that will never arrive. The ideology in question, represented here by Dr.
Wynona's essay makes two claims that cannot coexist. First, that forgiveness is a sovereign internal act, a gift that belongs entirely to the giver.
Second, that the giver of this gift also possesses unilateral authority to declare the relationship done, to enforce closure as a boundary the other party must respect. The first claim grants the forgiver moral credit for grace. The second claim grants the forgiver structural power over the relationship status. Together, they produce a total monopoly. The forgiver controls the gift and the exit. She is judge, jury, and executioner. She determines what is given when it is received and when it is withdrawn, and she calls this justice. The question exposes the fracture. If forgiveness is genuinely a gift, freely given, unconditionally bestowed, then the giver has already surrendered control over how that gift is used. You cannot give a present and then demand that the recipient ask your permission before unwrapping it. You cannot forgive someone and then require their ongoing submission to your emotional timetable. If forgiveness is sovereign, it is sovereign in both directions. The forgiver does not need the recipient's permission to forgive, and the recipient does not need the forgiver's permission to consider the matter closed.
But Dr. Wynona wants it both ways. She wants the moral authority of the gift giver and the structural authority of the gatekeeper.
She wants forgiveness to be a private act when that suits her, requiring no input from the forgiven, and a relational weapon when that suits her, binding the forgiven to her unilateral decree. This is not a theory. It is a power grab wearing theology's clothing. The winning question is the blade that severs the disguise. It reframes the entire debate around a single, unanswerable logical demand. Define your terms and apply the same standard to both parties. The ideology cannot survive this test. What follows is the autopsy too.
Why the ideology cannot answer it. Dr. Wynona's essay is a masterwork of evasion, and I say that without sarcasm because the evasion is genuinely skillful. She anticipates the objection. She names it.
She even supplies a formal syllogism for her opponent, which is the mark of someone trained in rhetoric and confident in her ability to misdirect. She then declares the syllogism a category error and moves on as though labeling something a fallacy is the same as demonstrating one. It is not. Here is the structural problem she cannot solve. Forgiveness and being done are being used to mean whatever she needs them to mean in each sentence. When she needs forgiveness to sound noble and self-sufficient, it is the internal labor of releasing resentment of private psychic When she needs being done to function as relational power, it becomes the relational boundary that says, I no longer owe you access. Notice what happened. She slid from an internal state, releasing resentment, to an external demand. You must respect my boundary without a logical bridge between them. The transition is smuggled, not argued. This is why she cannot answer the winning question. To answer it honestly, she would have to admit one of two things. Option A, forgiveness is purely internal, which means being done is also purely internal. She can feel done But she cannot demand that anyone else recognize it as a relational status. She cannot impose her internal state as a binding boundary on another person. The right to be done collapses into the right to feel however I feel, which is trivially true and politically useless. Nobody disputes that you can feel done. The dispute is over whether your feeling constitutes a verdict the other party must accept. Option B, being done is genuinely relational, a binding status change in the relationship that the other party must honor. But if it is relational, it is no longer purely internal, which means it is no longer a sovereign act. It requires recognition. It enters the territory of negotiation, reciprocal standards, and mutual acknowledgement. The forgiver cannot unilaterally declare a relational status and demand compliance. That is not a gift. That is a decree. Dr.
Wynona's entire essay is a frantic oscillation between these two options, never committing to either, because each one destroys a part of her claim.
She needs option A's moral prestige, the noble sovereign forgiver, and option B's structural power, the unilateral boundary enforcer. But you cannot have both. The gift giver who demands the recipient's submission has not given a gift. She has issued a terms of service agreement and disguised it as grace. Her essay proves this by its own structure. Notice how much energy she spends attacking the demand for reassurance, the man who wants evidence, ongoing confirmation, a certificate of absolution. She frames this as male entitlement, the desire to control the woman's emotional state. But this is a straw man and a clever one. The actual objection is not, I demand proof you have forgiven me. The objection is, if you have the right to declare us done, do I have the same right? She never answers this. She cannot. Because a yes would dismantle her asymmetry, and a no would reveal her position as domination, not justice. She also deploys the classic Kafka trap. If you object to the asymmetry, you are proving your need to control her, which confirms her theory that men seek dominance. Any resistance validates the framework. This is unfalsifiable, Popper's defining criterion of a non-theory. A claim that absorbs all counter-evidence is not a claim about reality. It is a closed system of self-confirmation. It is theology without God, demanding faith and punishing apostasy. The deeper reason the ideology cannot answer the question is that it was never designed to be answered. It was designed to function, and its function is clear: to grant one-party unilateral authority over the emotional and relational terms of engagement, to frame that authority as moral virtue, and to pathologize any objection as proof of the objector's guilt. This is not ethics. It is a court system with one judge, no jury, no appeal, and a presumption of guilt for the defendant.
It is, in miniature, exactly the procedural injustice that the broader ideology claims to oppose, transferred from the legal sphere to the domestic one, and dressed in the language of care. 3. Dr. Wynona's fallacy map.
Let us be precise. Here is the catalogue of formal errors in the essay, each identified by its proper name and demonstrated from the text: equivocation, the essay's central move. Forgiveness is used in two senses: one, internal release of resentment, and two, the authority to determine relational closure. These are not the same act. The first is a psychological event. The second is a structural power claim. She slides between them without signaling the shift, which allows her to borrow the moral weight of one to justify the coercive force of two. When the critic attacks two, she retreats to one, I'm just releasing resentment. When the critic grants one, she advances to two, and I alone decide when we are done. This is the Mote and Bailey in its purest form. Retreat to the defensible position when challenged. Reoccupy the ambitious position when unchallenged. Mote and Bailey. The Mote, forgiveness, is an internal act that belongs to the giver. This is defensible and uncontroversial. The Bailey, therefore, the giver, has unilateral authority to impose relational closure as a boundary the other party must respect. This is ambitious and highly contestable. She never argues from the Mote to the Bailey. She simply asserts the Bailey and dares you to notice the gap. Strawman, she characterizes the opposing position as a demand for reassurance, ongoing confirmation, and a certificate of absolution. This reframes the call for reciprocal standards as a narcissistic need for emotional servicing. The actual objection that relational closure, if it is to function as a binding status, must be mutually acknowledged rather than unilaterally decreed is never addressed. She attacks the weakest version of the argument and ignores the strongest. Loaded analogy, the thief and homeowner metaphor. The man who caused harm is a thief who chose to enter. The woman who was harmed is the homeowner who lives there. This analogy presupposes the very conclusion. It is meant to illustrate that the woman is the rightful owner of the emotional space and the man is an intruder. But that is the question at issue, not the answer. If the relationship is genuinely mutual, then both parties are homeowners, not one owner and one trespasser. The analogy smuggles in a premise about original entitlement and presents it as common sense. It is not common sense, it is a legal fiction dressed in domestic clothing, special pleading. The asymmetry of authority is justified by reference to history, the claim that women have been systematically denied the power to define their own emotional closure, even granting the historical claim for the sake of argument. This does not logically entail that this particular woman in this particular relationship should have this particular power over this particular man. The move from structural history to individual entitlement is a category error. History does not confer personal sovereignty. If it did, every group that has ever been historically disadvantaged would have a license for unilateral authority in every interpersonal dispute. This would produce not justice, but a hierarchy of grievance, which is of course exactly what the ideology produces: appeal to emotion. The passage about the woman who had to survive the middle. This is vivid, powerful, and logically irrelevant. The question is not whether the harmed party suffered. The question is whether suffering confers unilateral authority over relational closure. It does not. Suffering confers a claim to repair, to acknowledgement, to restitution. It does not confer the right to be judge in your own case. That principle, nemo judex in causa sua, is one of the oldest safeguards of justice in the Western legal tradition. Dr.
Winona, who is happy to invoke institutional justice when it suits her. Welcome to your own architecture, conveniently forgets it here. Kafka trap.
The objection to the asymmetry is framed as proof of the need for the asymmetry. If you object, you are demonstrating your desire to control when she stops being angry. The system is sealed. Every possible response from the objector confirms the theory. This is unfalsifiable and therefore non-cognitive. It tells us nothing about reality. It tells us everything about the ideology's need to insulate itself from critique. Redefinition without argument. The right to be done is not the opposite of forgiveness. It is forgiveness's final form. This is asserted, not argued. There is no demonstration that forgiveness necessarily terminates in withdrawal or boundary enforcement. Forgiveness could equally terminate in reconciliation, restored trust, or mutual repair. She has selected one possible endpoint, exit, and declared it definitive. This is not a logical deduction from the nature of forgiveness. It is a partisan choice presented as metaphysical necessity. 4. The axis by axis Socratic cross-examination. What follows is a series of questions, each targeting a specific structural support of the ideology. Each question works not because it is rhetorically clever, but because it identifies a logical fault line, a place where the ideology's definitions collapse or its standards become asymmetrical. I will take each axis in turn, present the key question, and explain its mechanism. Axis I, the asymmetry of emotional labor. Question: if men are responsible for the emotional climate, why are they not responsible for the emotional verdict? Grammar. The question turns on the definition of responsible. In modern relational discourse, men are assigned responsibility for managing the emotional environment of relationships, reading cues, adjusting behavior, performing emotional labor, a term originally coined by Arlie Hochschild to describe paid service work and now opportunistically expanded to cover any interpersonal accommodation. But if responsibility for the emotional climate is a duty, then responsibility for the emotional verdict, the judgment about whether the climate has improved, whether the issue is resolved, whether the relationship can continue, should logically follow. You do not assign someone the job of cleaning the kitchen and then deny them the authority to declare when it is clean. Logic. The syllogism of the dominant ideology runs: 1. Men must manage the emotional climate. 2. Managing the climate includes resolving conflicts. 3. Therefore, men are responsible for resolution. But Dr.
Winona's essay reverses premise. 3. Men are responsible for the labor of resolution, but women hold the verdict. This is a structural contradiction.
If the man does the work, he must have some say in whether the work is complete. Otherwise, he is a contractor whose client can declare the job unfinished forever and demand unpaid overtime indefinitely. Why the ideology evades this? The ideology evades it by separating labor from authority. Men provide the labor, women hold the authority. This mirrors a much older pattern of exploitation. The worker produces, the owner decides. The ideology, which claims to oppose exploitation, reproduces it exactly, with the genders reassigned and the mechanism renamed. Axis 2. The definition of done. Question: does done mean the issue is resolved or that you are no longer angry? Grammar. The word done is undefined in the essay, and this is not an accident. Done could mean A. The underlying conflict has been addressed to the satisfaction of both parties. B. The forgiver no longer feels anger about the conflict. C. The forgiver no longer wishes to discuss the conflict.
Regardless of whether it has been addressed, these are three very different propositions. Dr. Winona uses done as though it means all three simultaneously, but they are logically distinct.
If done means a resolution, then it requires mutual acknowledgement. You cannot unilaterally declare a conflict resolved while the other party still experiences it as unresolved. That is not resolution, it is withdrawal. If done means B. The cessation of anger, then it is an internal state with no relational authority. You can feel unangry. You cannot demand that anyone else treat your unanger as a verdict. If done means C. Refusal to discuss, then it is a boundary, not a judgment. It is the right to disengage, which is legitimate, but which carries no implication of moral resolution. You can walk away. You cannot walk away and call it justice. Logic. The moat and bailey operates here with full force.
When challenged, Dr. Winona retreats to B. I'm just describing my internal state. When unchallenged, she advances to A or C, and my internal state constitutes a binding relational judgment.
The slide from feeling to authority is never argued. It is performed. Falsifiability test. If done means resolved, what would count as evidence that it is not resolved? If no evidence can challenge the declaration, then done is unfalsifiable and therefore not a claim about reality. Axis 3. The burden of proof in conflict resolution. Question: if forgiveness is mutual, why is the proof unilateral? Grammar: forgiveness is grammatically active. One party forgives, another is forgiven. But proof, the evidence that forgiveness has occurred, is treated as flowing in one direction. The man must demonstrate that he has changed, that he is sorry, that he is worthy. The woman's forgiveness, once declared, requires no demonstration. It is accepted on her word. But if the man's evidence of change is required, the woman's evidence of genuine forgiveness should be equally required. Otherwise, we have an asymmetry of epistemic standards. His inner state must be proven by outward behavior, while her inner state is accepted on declaration. Logic: this violates the principle of same act, same standard.
If proving an internal state requires external evidence for one party, it requires external evidence for both. Dr. Winona's framework exempts the woman from evidentiary demands while imposing them on the man.
This is not reciprocity. It is a one-directional burden of proof, indistinguishable from the presumption of guilt. Why the ideology evades this? It evades the question by redefining the woman's declaration as lived experience, which is framed as self-authenticating. Her word is evidence because she is the victim. His word is not evidence because he is the accused. But this presumes the verdict before the trial. It assumes the woman is the victim and the man is the perpetrator, then uses that assumption to determine whose testimony counts. Circular reasoning. She is believed because she is the victim. She is the victim because she is believed. Axis IV. The reciprocity of forgiven debt. Question: If a debt is forgiven, does the creditor lose the right to collect, or does the debtor lose the right to complain? Grammar. Forgiveness, in its economic roots, Old English vergeven, to give up, to grant, to remit, means the cancellation of a debt. When a creditor forgives a debt, the debtor is released. But, and this is the crucial point, the creditor also gives up the right to collect. Forgiveness is bidirectional in its effects. It releases the debtor and disarms the creditor.
You cannot forgive a debt and then continue to collect on it. You cannot say, "I forgive you," and then continue to exact penalties. Logic, Dr. Wynona's framework, violates this.
She wants to forgive the moral credit while retaining the right to enforce the collection. But if the debt is forgiven, the ledger is closed. If the ledger is still open, the debt was not forgiven, it was restructured. She has the right to choose either option, but she cannot claim both. Forgiveness with ongoing collection is not forgiveness. It is a payment plan disguised as grace, reciprocal standard. Would she accept this from a man? If a man declared, "I forgive you," to a woman who had wronged him, and then continued to enforce boundaries based on the wrong, would she consider that forgiveness genuine? Or would she correctly identify it as ongoing punishment dressed in the language of absolution? Axis V, the authority of the victim's narrative. Question. If the victim's feeling is the ultimate truth, how can the victim be wrong about being done? Grammar. Feeling is epistemically slippery. It can mean A, an internal sensation, I feel sad; B, a judgment, I feel this is wrong; C, a fact claim, I feel unsafe, therefore I am unsafe. The ideology conflates all three, treating subjective states as objective facts. I feel harmed becomes I was harmed. I feel unsafe becomes I am unsafe. The feeling is the evidence, the verdict, and the sentence. Logic, if the victim's feeling is the ultimate epistemic authority as standpoint epistemology claims, then the victim's feeling about resolution should also be authoritative, but this produces an unfalsifiable loop. If she feels done, she is done. If she feels unresolved, she is unresolved. There is no independent standard against which her feeling can be checked. This means the entire relational status is determined by one party's internal state, with no mechanism for verification, no possibility of error, and no recourse for the other party. This is not epistemology, it is monarchy. Falsifiability. If her feeling is always authoritative, what would count as evidence that her feeling is mistaken? Nothing. The claim is unfalsifiable. It absorbs all counter-evidence. If he says, "I think we resolved this," and she says, "I don't," her statement prevails, not because it is better supported, but because her feeling is epistemically sovereign. This is a dictatorship of subjectivity, and it is incompatible with any system of reciprocal justice. Axis 6, the temporal sovereignty of resentment. Question. Why does the woman hold the temporal key to the relationship status, while the man holds the labor key? Grammar. Temporal here refers to time, the authority to determine when an issue is resolved, how long the process takes, and whether the timeline can be shortened or extended. The ideology grants this temporal authority exclusively to the woman. She decides how long the man must perform restitution. She decides when the waiting period ends. She controls the clock. Logic. If the man holds the labor key, the duty to repair, to adjust, to demonstrate change, but the woman holds the temporal key, the authority to determine when the labor is sufficient, then the man is in a position of indefinite servitude. He must work without knowing when the work will end. He must perform without knowing what performance will satisfy. The goalposts are mobile, and only she can see them. This is the structure of indentured labor, not of repair. In any just system of restitution, the terms are defined in advance. What is owed for how long, and what constitutes completion. Dr.
Wynona's system defines none of these. It is open-ended extraction with no mechanism for discharge.
The man can never know if he has paid enough, because the creditor, who is also the judge, reserves the right to extend the debt indefinitely. Reciprocal standard. In any commercial or legal context, a debt without terms is unenforceable. A contract that says you owe me, and I will decide when you have paid enough forever, would be struck down as unconscionable. Why should emotional debts be treated differently? Why should the standards of justice that govern every other domain of human interaction be suspended the moment a woman's feelings are involved? 5. The child test. Let us apply the simplest possible test, the one a child would devise, because children have not yet learned to disguise their contradictions in academic prose. Child's version of the winning question, if I give you a present, can you take it back just because you changed your mind? The child sees what the ideologue cannot. A gift, once given, is no longer the giver's to control. If you give someone a present, you cannot follow them around demanding that they use it the way you intended, display it where you specify, or return it to you whenever you feel like reclaiming it. The gift is theirs. You let go. That is what giving means. If forgiveness is a gift, then it operates by the same logic. You forgive, you release the debtor, you let go of the resentment, you surrender the claim. You do not get to follow the forgiven person around, checking that they have received your forgiveness properly, enforcing their acknowledgement of it, and declaring, "I'm done with you," whenever it suits your emotional needs.
But Dr. Wynona's framework does exactly this. It gives the gift of forgiveness with one hand and takes it back with the other.
It says, "I forgive you, but I also reserve the right to declare when we are done, to refuse to discuss it further, to enforce my sense of closure as a boundary you must respect, and to frame any objection as proof that you have not really changed. That is not forgiveness. That is a performance of generosity whose actual function is control." Child's version of the labor question. Why does he have to clean up the mess, but she decides if it's clean? The child sees the asymmetry instantly. If he does the cleaning, he should have some say in when the cleaning is done. If she is the only one who can judge, then she is not a participant in the cleanup. She is an inspector. And an inspector who is also the aggrieved party, who also controls the timeline, who also defines the standards, and who also cannot be wrong, that is not a partner. That is a tyrant with a clipboard. Child's version of the debt question. If you say I don't owe you, why do you still act like I do? The child's logic is impeccable. If the debt is forgiven, the creditor stops collecting. If the creditor keeps collecting, the debt was not forgiven. You cannot have it both ways. The child does not need standpoint, epistemology, or intersectional grievance theory to see this. The child needs only the basic principle of consistency. Say what you mean, and mean what you say. Child's version of the narrative authority question. Why is her feeling more important than his doing? Again, the child cuts to the bone. If he has done something, apologized, changed his behavior, made restitution, those are observable facts. Her feeling about those facts is important, but it is not more real than the facts themselves. A feeling does not override a fact. A child knows this. The ideology has forgotten it, because the ideology needs feelings to function as facts in order to preserve the authority of the aggrieved party. The maxim. Here is the principle, stated as cleanly as I can state it. If forgiveness is a gift, it is given freely, but being done is a toll you charge for the privilege of having received it. And a toll charged for a gift is not generosity, it is a racket. The ideology of the right to be done is not ethics. It is not justice. It is not care. It is a system of unilateral emotional governance designed to grant one party total authority over the relational terms of engagement, while disguising that authority as moral virtue. It cannot survive the application of reciprocal standards. It cannot answer the simplest questions a child would ask. It cannot define its own terms without contradicting itself. What it can do, and does, expertly, is function. It functions to extract labor without granting authority. It functions to impose verdicts without offering evidence. It functions to silence objection by pathologizing the objector. And it functions to make the party who holds all the power feel like the party who holds none. That is not forgiveness. That is not being done. That is a court with one judge, no jury, no appeal, and a presumption of guilt held in your own kitchen, presided over by someone who insists she is the victim while she hands down the sentence. You do not owe confession to a hostile myth. You do not owe indefinite emotional servitude to a framework that cannot define its own terms. and you do not owe gratitude for a gift that comes with a perpetual invoice attached. Forgiveness is either a gift or it is not. If it is, let it go, and let the giver let it go, truly without strings, without tolls, without the permanent reservation of the right to reclaim. If it is not, if it is a transaction, a decree, a tool of control, then call it what it is and stop calling it grace. The truth does not need your permission to be true, and neither does this critique need the ideology's permission to be devastating. It is devastating because the ideology is incoherent, and incoherence eventually answers to no one, not even to itself. You saw it. The moment you read that question, something cracked, not your resolve, but the spell. The spell that says her pain is a mandate, your pain is a footnote, and your forgiveness is a utility she may summon at will. You caught the contradiction because you've been trained by the culture to not catch it. The gynocentric machinery, the whole indoor garden of it, with its curated emotional entitlements and its hidden seed pods of control, depends on you never asking why a gift you supposedly give requires her permission to hold. A gift with a lien on it isn't a gift, it's a lease, and she's the landlord. That question unmasks the entire racket. She wants the moral status of being forgiven without the moral cost of earning it, and she wants you to hand over the closure like a clerk at a returns desk. No receipt required, no questions asked. The moment you ask why she needs your permission to keep it, the architecture collapses. She sputters. She pivots to rage, to tears, to "you're so bitter." Good. That's the sound of a scam meeting a question it can't deflection dodge. Here is your blade then. Memorize the question. Deploy it the next time a woman, or a therapist, or an HR facilitator, or a church group leader channeling the same emotional extraction logic tells you that forgiveness is your obligation and her right to receive. Let them finish their sermon. Let the word healing hang in the air like incense. Then, calm as stone, ask, if forgiveness is a gift you give, why do you need my permission to keep it? Watch the silence that follows. That silence is the sound of a hidden premise dying in daylight. You have not refused anything. You have not attacked anyone. You have simply held a mirror to the transaction and asked whether the currency is real. And in that held moment, that clean, undefended instant of clarity, you will feel something the gynocentric order has spent your entire life trying to steal from you, the ground under your own feet. Your mind is the territory they cannot conquer. Once you learn to name their moves, walk out of the room whole. The gift stays in your hands until you decide. That is not cruelty, that is sovereignty. And sovereignty, not submission, is what makes a man capable of genuine mercy, the kind no one extorted from him. Sponsored book, The Woke Plague, How Cultural Marxism Hijacked Society and How to Reclaim Your Mind. Buy on Amazon or Google or Spotify Amazon link, https://www.amazon.com/nashi Conrad Riker ebook DPB0DF6KGR1S Google link, https://play mo google.com store audiobooks details ID AQAAE I5W2 NLM Spotify link, https://toloshower openskatif.com.show WCX CQZKJBL 1BM NFIC colors CLB0 men are under siege. If you're reading this, you already feel it, the slow rot of your dignity, the legal noose around your neck, the cultural smear campaign branding your biology as a crime. I wrote this book because I lived it. I watched friends lose their homes to divorce courts rigged by feminist judges. I stood in silent rage as my brother swallowed a bullet after false abuse claims stripped him of his kids. I spent years unlearning the lie that my strength made me a villain. This isn't theory, it's blood-soaked reality. Code Red isn't for the faint-hearted or the comfortably numb. If you still believe equality means fairness, if you think sacrificing your paycheck to an ex-wife's shopping sprees is noble, if you apologize for your testosterone, close this book, go knit a sweater, collect stamps. This is a war manual, not a therapy session for the spiritually castrated. For the rest of you, men who've tasted betrayal by systems designed to break you, this is your arsenal. We'll dissect Sweden's gender parity farce expose how Gillette's toxic ad cost shareholders billions, and arm you with FBI stats feminists buried. You learn to shield assets from divorce vampires, rebuild brotherhoods in a world that bans male spaces, and weaponize evolutionary truths against woke sermonizers. The chapters ahead aren't polite debates. They're grenades. The marriage plantation reveals how no-fault divorce turned you into a tax mule. Feminism's body count connects male suicide epidemics to academia's male tears mockery. The transgender endgame dismantles the cult denying biology while sterilizing kids. Every word is backed by data, case law, and the unvarnished grit of lived betrayal. This isn't victimhood, it's revolt. You'll finish these pages with blueprints to dodge false accusations, reclaim fatherhood, and ignite the alpha sovereignty buried under decades of guilt. But warning, these truths will enrage you. They'll dismantle every feel-good lie you've swallowed. If that terrifies you, exit now. For the brave, the men ready to lead again, your reckoning starts here. No platitudes, no surrender. Just raw, unapologetic strategy to resurrect the civilization feminists, Marxists, and gender lunatics are burning. The choice is simple. Die on your knees or fight like the man you were born to be. Buy on Amazon or Google or Spotify Amazon link https://www.amazon.com/nashi Conrad Riker ebook DPB0DF6KGR1S Google link https://play mo google.com store audiobooks details ID AQAAE I5W2 NLM Spotify link https://lorigol/lorigonswert the win open 7 ulleruation CQZKJBL 1BM NFO Kate CLB0. The Woke Plague, How Cultural Marxism Hijacked Society and How to Reclaim Your Mind. Written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.